Subscribe and like this video, more interesting revenge stories of elderly people coming soon.
My name is Jonas. I am 76. And it seems I have become invisible. My house stands on the outskirts of the city, an old building that creaks when the wind breaks the branches of an old cherry tree. I once built it for my family, to be cozy, warm, stable. Now, it's just me. The stove crackles, the kettle whistles every morning, the blanket smells of dust and old wood. The TV is on without sound. I don't need the voices on the screen, I already know what they are talking about. About youth, ambitions, the future. Everything that I no longer have. Everything that was stolen from me not by age, but by indifference. My children are successful. Sergey is the CEO of some construction corporation. Ludmila is a psychologist with her own course on harmony in the family. Irony. My grandchildren have their own lives, their own apartments, their own faces in their phones. They come twice a year, with flowers and empty eyes. For them, I am an obligation, not a person. In the store, the saleswoman asks, "What else do you want?" With a look that says, "Hurry up." In the hospital, they look at me through the eyes, the nurse calls the doctor, as if taking out the trash, "Take Grandpa away, he doesn't understand anymore." And I heard everything. Every word. Every tone. And I didn't forget anything. I sit at the kitchen table in the morning. The paper is turning yellow. I hold the pen, still firmly. I write. Not thoughts. Events. Names. Dates. Words. What my grandson said when I asked for help with Wi-Fi. How a passerby looked at me when I dropped the bread. How Sir he didn't pick up the phone and then wrote, "Dad, I'm in a meeting. Write if there's something urgent." I wrote. But there was no answer. They say that old age is peace. In fact, it's a sentence without a trial. Slow disappearance. Weathering. People walk right through you as if you were gone. But I'm still here. And I remember everything. Once I was silent because I didn't want to bother. Now I'm silent because I listen. I watch. And something grows inside me. Not regret. Not sadness. But something dark and quiet, resentment, hidden like a night shadow. A shadow they can't see. But it's already there. I wasn't always a shadow. Once upon a time, I was someone people reached out to. I could walk into any office and walk out with a signed contract. I didn't say much, but my words carried weight. People listened, not out of fear, but out of respect. Or maybe out of fear too. In the 90s, when everything was falling apart, I was building. When others were hiding, I stood in the cold, at the market, in banks with those who held a chain around everyone's throat. I didn't steal, I didn't lie, but I played hard. In business, I was a strategist. In the family, I was a support. The children didn't understand how hard I was carrying everything on my own. And they shouldn't have. They should have just lived. And I should have survived. I remember the day Ludmila went to university. She was still asleep, and I drove out of town at night to negotiate with those who could give me an interest-free loan, but with conditions. I paid. Not with money. With time, health, silence. I gave myself without a trace. Partners. Oh, how many of them betrayed me? They smiled, shook hands, and then framed me. And I was silent. I wrote it down. I burned it into my memory, who, when, for how much sold their humanity. But then I didn't have time for revenge. Then I had to build. I was respected. The city knew my name. When I went into a restaurant, the waiter would come up to me, not even waiting for my order. People took off their hats when I buried my wife. She was my light. She died, and I didn't break down. Because the children remained. But every year, more and more silence, less and less warmth. And now, I'm alone again. Only no longer young, and not strong on the outside. Only inside I still have something. Every night I reread old clippings. There are my interviews, photos from events, certificates, diplomas. On one is the inscription, "For contribution to the development of the region." This region despises me today. In the offices where my word once stood, now there are other people's children sitting who don't even greet each other. But I remember. I remember how Surti cried when I bought him out of the army, when he was still young and naive. How he hid behind my back. Now he hides from my calls. I remember how I helped Ivan, an old partner, when his business burned down. He didn't even reply to a letter asking me to help repair my roof. They all think that time has erased everything. That memory has faded. No. It has become clearer. I thought that I lived for them. Now I understand that I built everything that they forgot. I created a fortress in which they now live, not knowing who built each brick. They believed that my strength was in money, in status. But in reality, it's in the mind, in the discipline, in the ability to wait. And I'm waiting. A little longer. Because even the strongest don't hear the shadow following them. Until it's too late to look back. Pain doesn't always come with a scream. Real pain is quiet. It doesn't sharpen you like a knife, but like water on a stone, drop by drop. Monotonous. Slowly. Inevitably. My son hasn't picked up the phone for the third day. I called him just like that. There was nothing important. I just wanted to hear how he was doing. You know how it is, when you want to remind yourself without asking for anything. But he didn't answer. Then I sent a voice message, a flat, cold voice. "Dad, I'm at the facility, I'll call you back later." He didn't call back. And he won't call back. My grandson. He came because his mother made him. I asked him to help me set up the internet. He connected the phone to my Wi-Fi, laughed. "Grandpa, are you still using this?" He's a dinosaur. His laugh was not malicious, no. Just indifferent. I smiled. But inside, something clenched. And not from resentment. And from understanding. He doesn't see me. He sees the old man. Not Jonas. Not the person who built the foundations of his life. In the hospital, even worse. A week ago, a blood pressure check. Q. I sit silently. Next to me, a woman with her grandson. The child says loudly, "Why does this grandfather stink?" The woman whispers quietly, "Old people don't feel anything anymore. Be patient." When they called me into the office, the doctor didn't even look up. He threw the card to the nurse and grumbled, "This one again." He still can't hear. You tell him yourself. I hear. I hear everything. On the street, my bag tore. I bent down, apples fell. People walked by. Some turned away. Someone quickened their pace. One girl even pretended to be talking on the phone, although the main screen was flashing on the screen without a ring. I wrote everything down in a notebook. Date. Place. Reaction. Not out of revenge, out of fixation. But, to be honest, something was changing in me. Each such scene is a small nail. I no longer tried to pull them out. I counted. Because knowledge is control. And control is my old, familiar strength. I often lie awake at night. I sit by the window. The darkness is my witness. I think about how easily people turn away. How quickly they forget. How contemptuously they take what once kept them afloat. I don't complain. I don't tell anyone. They think I'm broken. But I'm collected. It's just not for them. My notebook is already half full. I'm not keeping a diary, I'm building a map. And on this map, everyone who betrayed, laughed at, despised. My marks are not emotions. They are positions. And I've always loved chess. Especially the final game. Especially when the opponent doesn't yet realize that he's lost. They think I'm helpless. That being old is weakness. But old age is camouflage. And it's comfortable to wait in it. To wait. Because while they look superficially, I look deeper. And I see right through them. It was Wednesday. That day was no different from the others, a gray, ragged wind, the clouds hung low over the rooftops. I was returning from the store, slowly, carefully, as always. The packages were heavy, my hands were fragile, like old roots. At the crossing I tripped. The tile was bulging, as always. I fell for a long time, as if in a dream. One package burst, the cans of peas rolled across the asphalt. People stopped. I heard someone laugh. Look, the old man passed out again. It's his own fault, what's going on? I was lying, and next to him was my hearing aid, which had rolled out of my pocket. And then I heard clearly. Very clearly. No one needs it. These words didn't hurt. They became a point. A click. Like when a light is turned on in a dark room. Suddenly you see everything. I got up alone. Slowly. Calmly. I looked at the people. Several had already left. Others avoided my gaze. And then for the first time in a long time I smiled. But not with that old smile that asks for understanding. But the one that comes before action. I didn't enter the house like a grandfather. I opened the door like an office 20 years ago. Exactly. Resolutely. Without a doubt. In the basement is an old safe. I kept it not because of things, but because of myself. Inside is not money, not jewelry. There is a notebook, an old mobile phone with buttons, flash drives, business cards, photos, newspaper clippings, black notebooks. The name of everyone I have ever helped. Who I have forgiven. Who I have forgotten. I sat down at the table. I started with the first one, Igor Grechko, once a small entrepreneur whom I pulled out of the debt pit. Now he is an analyst at a large consulting company. His number has changed, but I had the number of his accountant. Then Alina Kovalchuk. She lived in my driveway back in the 90s. I paid for her son when he was caught with drugs. He grew up, now an IT specialist. And she is the head of social services. I wrote her a letter. Anonymous. But precise. Every contact is a thread. And I am an old weaver. I tied knots, strained the web. But this time, not for salvation. For payback. I turned on the TV just to see when the news would come. Because the game had begun. I didn't ask anymore. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I didn't sleep at night, not because I was tired, but because I wanted peace. I was in the game again. And this time, my rules. Sons, grandchildren, acquaintances, they all lived, thinking that everything was under control. But real control is when you are not seen, but you are in control. I took out old photos. In one, my wife and I. She looked at me with the same clarity I had never seen anywhere else. I placed the photo by the lamp. You see, honey. They thought I was gone. Darkness isn't always evil. It's just a space for silence. And silence is the loudest sound when used properly. And I haven't even started yet. The days became clear. Like in a military camp, waking up, watching the news, recording actions, analyzing reactions. I was no longer a grandfather in an old plaid. I returned to the real me. The one I was before everyone learned not to see me. I didn't destroy. I brought it to light. My revenge is not blows, not threats. I just revealed the truth. And let them look at it. Without filters. Serhiy, my son. His company won tenders through schemes with contractors. I had the data from the time when I helped him with the first contracts. Then he told me everything. And I remembered. I sent documents to a journalist with whom I once negotiated the development of an industrial zone. He put everything on the air. Serhiy was fired. The board of directors dissociated themselves. The news spoke cautiously unconfirmed sources, possible violations. But the reputation is like crystal. A crack, that's all. His voicemail came to me the next day. Dad, we need to talk. This is not a coincidence. I know. I didn't answer. I listened to the silence. In it was his fear. And that was enough. The grandson is Vlad. Young, self-confident. His first advertising contract is with an American brand. I knew who was negotiating. And I knew who wouldn't like his old TikTok jokes, where he makes fun of pensioners and stinkers on a trolley bus. I simply dumped the archive of saved videos into the right email. And signed it, potential brand misalignment. The contract burned in 2 days. Vlad posted a story with the caption "Cancellation is the new weapon." He didn't mention me. But I saw his gaze fall when we happened to pass each other in the supermarket. For the first time in a year, he greeted. Without a smile. People who had once stood taller were now staggering. Alina from the social service suddenly lost her job after a correspondence leaked, with contempt for clients. Her son, my debtor, couldn't stand it, wrote to me at night, "Is that you? If so, tell me, for what?" I didn't answer. They didn't need my words. They needed my presence. And now they felt it. I didn't leave the house. And yet I was everywhere. In the offices, in the news, in the mail, in the thoughts of those who thought that I had simply destroyed me with time. I wrote down every change in a notebook. The result achieved. The effect alarming, the initial stage of guilt. The calls became more frequent. From hidden numbers. And then already openly. Ludmilla arrived. With a cake. With eyes full of distrust and fear. "Dad, haven't you watched the news? Sergey was fired. They say someone leaked the information." I was silent. She said something else, but I looked at my watch. 4:00. At the window. At the streetlight, which had already become soft. Finally, she fell silent. The silence became my voice. It lay on the shoulder of the interlocutor, and pressed harder than a scream. The energy in the house changed. A cold crack passed through its walls. They no longer treated me as if I were a passing speck of dust in a corner. Now I became invisible in a different way. Like someone who was better left untouched. Because sometimes the shadow in the room is not just a shadow. It is a predator. And it does not forget. Everything fell silent. I was sitting in the living room, at the same old table. The tea had already gone cold, but I wasn't drinking it. I was looking out the window, where the soft evening light was falling. Autumn was slowly dying, like all the illusions around. The TV was off. The phone was silent. Everything that was important had already happened. And now, silence. The same one that I had carried inside me all these years. The one that at first stifled, and then became a weapon. Sergey arrived again. Not with flowers. Not with a fake smile. He came in silently, sat down opposite. For the first time in probably 10 years, he looked me straight in the eyes. And he didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "You did it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. There was no point. He knew. And I knew that he knew. But what was more important than the answer was the look. And he couldn't stand it. He lowered his eyes. The next day Ludmilla arrived. Without warning, without drama. She simply stood in the doorway and asked, "What do you want? Forgiveness?" I looked at her. Slowly. For a long time. And answered, "No. I want you to remember." What? Who I was. Who I am. They all gathered together, for the first time in many years. They sat on the old sofa, like strangers in a familiar place. The grandchildren were silent. Vlad did not look in my direction. The others were looking for topics to talk about, but they did not find any. Because for the first time, every word mattered. And everyone knew this silence was not accidental. I did not reproach. I did not accuse. That would be weakness. No, I only gave them what they could not bear, a reflection. They saw for themselves who they had become, because they had despised the one who held their world. I got up and went to the kitchen. I left them alone with themselves. And there was more punishment in this loneliness than in all my actions. Later, when everyone had left, I sat down at the table. I opened my diary. The black cover. The pages had faded with time, but the words hadn't. I picked up a pen and wrote the last entry. Revenge is not a scream. It is order and memory. It is a mirror that I held up to those who are used to not looking into it. I am not evil. I am not a saint. I am the truth that they have forgotten. I closed the notebook. The room became quiet. Silence is not emptiness. It is completion. Not a finale, but a new form of power. Because old age is not a sentence. It is a privilege. This is a stage where you no longer need to prove. Just show. You don't need to fear me. But you can't despise me either. Because I am not a grandfather. I am a shadow. And a shadow sees everything.